Good morning, good afternoon, good night. I'm Blackbright, and as you know, I talk about various topics that are quite controversial or which I think should be given a little thought or forethought. And today I want to talk about Brexit because it's double Dutch to some people. And, they harp on about immigrants, and I'm just wondering about, why does Brexit so paranoid about immigration when the UK has sold over 50% of its assets to foreigners? Now, there is the argument that, by having so much immigration, they lose their national identity and all this kind of stuff. But haven't they lost it by selling off a lot of the companies? Now, when I think about the 2016 national referendum that resulted in 52% voting to leave and 48% voting to remain, I can only think about why, at a very small margin, why that 52% voted to leave. And that was because Nigel Farage posted up those big old posters about all those Syrian refugees, making it look like they were invading the borders of the UK. And of course, people got anxious and worried, and they thought, oh my God, if we're going to be flooded by all those immigrants, what do we have left? We don't have anything left. On top of that, Farage was talking about the 350 billion, which is actually 250 million, the 350 million that we pay to the EU every week, that could go to the NHS. That again was a lie. So, if the two main reasons for people voting to leave were based on lies, how valid is that? And why is Theresa May, knowing that, trying to force the issue and saying this is what the people voted for and this is what we want? The only reason why Theresa May is pushing Brexit is because of the immigration aspect of it. Once we leave Brexit, as immigrants, we won't have any protection from the EU. The European Court of Human Rights, we won't have any access to that. And the Brits will be able to do whatever they like, taking away those human rights, taking away working rights. And that's why I believe she's pushing for it. For no other reason. It's got nothing to do with what the people want. Because if it had to do with what the people want, then they would call another referendum. The thing is, I do understand that there are a lot of immigrants, but they've made it look as though immigrants are the ones who are taking social housing, who are taking their jobs. That's the way they've made it look. Do you know the EU, with the EU in particular, only 1 out of 10 is successful in getting benefits. 60% of EUs don't get any benefits. You know what I mean? So, and regard to all the other immigrants that they're complaining about, whether they're legal or illegal, it's got nothing to do with them taking your jobs. You know what it's got to do with? It's got to do with the British selling off enterprises. And do you know that they've sold off over 50%? And I'm going to tell you the companies that they've sold off. And they've sold them off for billions. And as a result of selling off these companies, all these people have lost, thousands and thousands of people have lost their jobs. And they've got the audacity to blame it on immigrants taking their jobs. Now, let me tell you who they've sold. They sold the British Energy. I'm not going to tell you all the prices, but the ones I know. They sent the British Energy to the French for 12 billion. Scottish and Newcastle breweries, they sold it to Carlsberg and Heineken, which I think is in Germany or Sweden, one of the European countries. They sold that for 8 billion. They sold ICI, that massive chemical company. They sold it to the Dutch for 8 billion. They sold Scottish Power to Spain for 11.6 billion. They sold British Airport Authority to the Spanish for 10 billion. They sold Thames Water to the Germans for 5 billion. They sold Pilkington Glass to Japan for 2 billion. They said they sold P&O Port Ferries to Dubai for 3.3 billion. They sold Abbey National to Spain for 8.5 billion. They sold Jaguar to Japan, I don't know for how much. These ones I don't know how much. Asda, they sold that to the United States. MG Rover, they sold that to China. British Steel, they sold that to India. British Energy, they sold that to France. Lottery, Camelot, they sold that to France. Our red buses, those beautiful red buses, they sold that to Germany. Boots, our lovely pharmacy, they sold that to the Italians for 12 billion. Selfridges, they sold that to Canada. Fortnum Mason, they sold to Canada. The Savoy, they sold that to Canada. Harrods, they sold that to Qatar. Debenhams, I forget who they sold that to. Dorchester, they sold that to Brunei. Nuclear power stations, they've sold to France, and they're negotiating selling some to the Russians. They nearly sold off the Royal Mail, but because the stocks fell, they didn't end up selling it. So it won't be long before we'll be working for foreign countries. So don't you think it's a bit hypocritical to say that foreigners are taking over, foreigners are taking their jobs, we don't like foreigners, and yet you're selling half of your assets to foreigners? What does that mean? And the thing is that when they sold them, these investors took the companies. Most of them shut them down. They didn't invest in them. Hence, a lot of jobs were lost. So how does that benefit the UK? And why are immigrants being blamed for their failures and their myopic, their short-sightedness? Why are immigrants being blamed for that? So if they've sold 50% of the efforts, what are they bargaining with? I mean, they're so arrogant. They're talking about they're going to bargain with the EU. And, they're so bullish. I was watching one programme. They were so bullish in the way they was attacking one of the representatives of the EU. In other words, trying to make him not negotiate, saying, I can't even remember what he says. That's for another video. But the fact of the matter is, it's almost like they want to get a free trade deal through the back door, and they want the EU to renege on that, even though they want to leave. They want to cherry pick what they want. They can't do that. If you're going to leave Brexit, leave Brexit. If you've made if you want to leave the EU, leave the EU. But you can't be compromised and expecting them to bow to you just because you made a mistake and just because you didn't do your homework and work out how much was involved. The thing is, it's easy to say we're going to leave the EU, but did they really understand what it meant? Did they really understand that there'll be no free trade? And did they really understand the implications between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic? Did they really understand, the limitations it places on the Brits going to Spain and the Schengen area? They didn't. They didn't realise what a close unit and in an integrated unit we've been with the EU since 1973. And yes, they probably have their laws. And yes, we want to be under our own jurisdiction. But you have to think about what have you got to offer. I mean, the people who remained, I think they was just thinking, if it ain't broke, why try to fix it? The UK sterling pound is at its lowest for 30 years. And we don't know what the result is going to be. So I get a bit worried when, if it was based on the truth, I wouldn't mind if they'd said, it's just because of the laws. We want to be independent of the EU. And by being independent of the EU, it will save us 250 million a week. And we will try and sort out the country and do what we're going to do. But you don't get those votes by building up fear and injecting the fear of God in everyone that, we're overrun by bloody immigrants. I mean, if you've got a problem with immigrants, why sell 50%, over 50% of your enterprises to them? And then be governed by them in a sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that, to be honest. I have nothing more to say, and I'll probably get a bollocking for this. But hey, it's just my opinion. That's all I've got to say. Bye-bye.